At 27, I thought the worst parts of my life were behind me. I was sitting in the oak-paneled study of my late grandfather's mansion, my palms damp against the leather chair. The lawyer's voice cut through the silence. All assets, including the mansion and valued at $215 million, are hereby left to his granddaughter, Emma Miller. The words felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else. My chest tightened with pride and terror all at once. Then, the double doors opened. My parents, the same people who abandoned me 15 years ago, walked in with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "We are her guardians," they announced, their voices echoing across the stunned room. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Before I could speak, my Uncle Anthony and my Aunt Philippa rose to their feet. And in that instant, I realized the real battle for my grandfather's legacy was only beginning. I wasn't always the granddaughter of a millionaire. Before marble floors and crystal chandeliers, my world was peeling wallpaper, broken floorboards, and the sour smell of spilled whiskey. I grew up in a rusty trailer on the outskirts of Dallas. My father, Robert, was once a mechanic, but by the time I was old enough to remember his face, his hands shook from gambling losses more than from working with tools. My mother, Linda, wore a waitress uniform so faded you could barely see the diner's logo on her chest. Most nights were the same. Dad would stumble in, his eyes bloodshot, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the thin walls. "Where's the money, Linda?" he'd roar. Mom would stand by the sink, hands wet from dishes. "I brought what I could. Stop asking for miracles." "Miracles?" he barked, tossing a crumpled envelope of unpaid bills onto the table. "You call this survival?" I would hide behind the thin bedroom door, clutching my pillow, my 12-year-old body trembling. Sometimes glass would shatter, sometimes Mom's muffled crying would follow. And always, silence came after the heavy silence of two people who had already given up. Mom loved me in her quiet, desperate way. I still see her tired eyes when she slid a bag of leftover diner food onto the table. "Eat, Emma." I already had something at work. She hadn't. I knew it. Her ribs showed through her blouse, but she still pushed the fries toward me, her lips pressed into a weak smile. Then came that morning. The cold bit through the trailer like knives. I woke up shivering under a paper-thin blanket. Usually, I'd hear their voices fighting, crying, or just the clink of coffee cups. But that morning, there was nothing. "Mom?" I whispered. No answer. "Dad?" My voice cracked. The living room was empty. The kitchen, too. I pushed open their bedroom door and found the bed unmade, the closet yawning open with clothes thrown about as if someone had left in a rush. My heart pounded as I stumbled toward the table. A torn scrap of notebook paper sat in the center, weighed down by a chipped mug. The handwriting was unmistakably my father's. "Find your grandfather. He'll take care of you." The words blurred as tears stung my eyes. My hands shook so badly the note slipped to the floor. I rushed outside barefoot, scanning the lot. No truck, no neighbors stirring, nothing but the whistle of dry wind through dead grass. They were gone. The question burned inside me. Why? What had I done so wrong for them to leave without a goodbye? That day, the little girl who still believed in family died. And in her place stood someone else, scared, trembling, but determined. I stuffed the note in my pocket, pulled on my torn sneakers, and told myself one thing. If my parents wouldn't fight for me, I'd have to fight for myself. I didn't go to school that day. I walked for blocks with the bitter January wind cutting into my skin, the note still clutched in my fist. By the time I reached my best friend Sophie's house, my lips were blue and my shoes were soaked with mud. Sophie opened the door, eyes wide. "Emma? What happened to you?" Her father, Hank, a truck driver with broad shoulders and calloused hands, appeared behind her. He saw the note, saw my face, and didn't waste time asking useless questions. He just nodded gravely. "Get in, kid. I'll drive you." The ride was silent, except for the growl of the old pickup engine. When we finally turned into Nichols Hills, I pressed my forehead to the window. I had never seen lawns so green, houses so tall, or gates so heavy. Each mansion looked like a fortress, and then we stopped in front of his house. The Miller mansion loomed like something out of a movie. White columns, red-tiled roof, Iron gates with cameras swiveling at the top. My stomach twisted into knots. Hank leaned on the steering wheel. "You sure about this, Emma?" I nodded, though every nerve in me screamed to run. Two guards approached, stern faces shadowed by the brim of their caps. Hank showed them the note. After a tense moment, they radioed someone inside. The gates creaked open. As we drove up the long driveway, the mansion grew larger, more suffocating. I clutched my backpack like a shield. The front door opened before we even reached it. A man in a black suit, silver hair perfectly combed, stood waiting. His voice was calm but sharp. "You must be Miss Emma. I'm Raymond, Mr. Miller's butler. He's expecting you." Expecting me? My throat tightened. Had my parents called him? Or had he known this day would come all along? Raymond led me inside. The marble floor gleamed under the chandelier, my reflection distorted in its polished surface. Paintings of ancestors glared down from gilded frames. It was beautiful. Yes, but there was no warmth. At the end of a long hall, Raymond paused before a heavy oak door. He knocked once. "Enter," a voice commanded from inside. Low, firm, unquestionable. Raymond pushed the door open, and there he was. My grandfather, Edward Miller, sat behind a massive desk, his gray suit immaculate, silver hair slicked back. His eyes were knives cold, precise, unforgiving. He didn't rise. He didn't smile. He just said, "Sit." My legs trembled as I obeyed. "I know why you're here," he began, voice flat. "Your parents abandoned you. From now on, you'll stay here. But understand one thing, I don't raise weaklings." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. 5 lines, handwritten in neat, deliberate strokes. "Be punctual. Be financially independent. Never lie. Take responsibility. Train your mind, body, and soul. These," he said, eyes piercing mine, "are my golden rules. You will live by them, break them, and you will regret it." I swallowed hard. The note from my father still crumpled in my pocket, the new rules of my life now staring me in the face, and just like that, my new battlefield began. The first morning in the mansion felt less like a rescue, and more like a military camp. At 5:30 a.m., Raymond barged into my room, flicking on the lights. "Up, Miss Emma." "Outside. Running shoes." I don't run," I mumbled, still groggy. "Rule number 5, he reminded me, his tone sharp but not unkind. "Train your body. Mr. Miller doesn't tolerate laziness." So, I ran. My legs screamed. The icy air stabbed my lungs, and my sneakers slapped against the endless gravel path circling the garden. My grandfather watched from the balcony, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Every stumble felt like judgment. At breakfast, I thought I could finally rest, but he began another test. "What time is it, Emma?" he asked. 7:15? Wrong. It's 7:16. Rule number 1, punctuality. Every minute counts. You will learn to master time, or it will master you. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than any yell my father had ever thrown at me. School was no escape. At the private academy, polished kids in designer clothes whispered behind my back. "She's the abandoned one, right? The charity case?" A blonde girl sneered as I passed. "Money can't buy her class." I wanted to shout, to tell them they had no idea what I had endured. Instead, I kept my head down, my cheeks burning. When I got home that day, I tried to hide in my room, playing a game on the old computer Raymond had lent me. But, the next morning, my grandfather summoned me to his study. "Rule number 3, never lie. Did you finish your assignments last night?" My throat went dry. Yes. His eyes narrowed. He tapped the computer report his staff had pulled from the Wi-Fi logs. "You played 2 hours of games. You lied." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Sorry doesn't erase dishonor." He ordered me outside to clean the entire backyard garden. I spent hours pulling weeds and thorns until my hands bled. By dusk, I was filthy, exhausted, and trembling with anger. When I dragged myself inside, Raymond met me at the door with a towel. His voice was softer than usual. "Don't hate him, Emma. He's not punishing you to break you. He's testing if you'll rise." I didn't answer. I just cried quietly into the towel, the salt stinging my lips. But as days turned into months, I started to understand. Each punishment carved a new layer of resilience into me. Each lecture sharpened my focus. My grandfather never offered comfort, but he gave me something my parents never could: structure, expectations, a standard to rise to. And slowly, the abandoned girl in the trailer began to fade, replaced by someone harder, stronger, someone who would never beg for love again. By the time I turned 18, I had grown used to the rhythm of the mansion: early runs, endless study hours, rules etched into my bones. But nothing prepared me for the day my grandfather summoned me to his office with a new command. "You will start working at Ross Heritage Jewelers," he said flatly, sliding a folder across the desk. I stared at the company's golden crest embossed on the cover. "Work? As in, an actual job?" His eyes sharpened. "Rule number 2, financial independence. You think I raised you to be a pampered heir?" "No, sir," I whispered. Raymond drove me to the downtown headquarters that Monday. The glass building rose like a jewel itself, glittering under the Oklahoma Sunday. Inside, employees in crisp suits moved with precision, their eyes flicking toward me. I knew what they were thinking. That's the abandoned granddaughter. At first, I was assigned menial tasks: filing invoices, running documents across departments, fetching coffee for executives. It felt humiliating, but every time I sighed, Raymond's voice echoed in my head. "Rise, Emma." Weeks later, the real test came. A South African diamond supplier threatened to cancel a multi-million-dollar contract, claiming a competitor offered a better deal. Panic rippled through the office. I overheard 2 managers whispering, "If this falls apart, the new collection collapses." That night, my grandfather called me into his study. "You will attend tomorrow's negotiation," he declared. My heart stopped. "Me? I'm not ready. I'm just..." His hand slammed on the desk. "Excuses are poison. You will sit at that table. If you fail, you learn. If you succeed, you prove you belong." The next morning, I walked into the boardroom, my palms sweating. Across the table sat Johan Vander, a man with sharp eyes and a knowing smirk. "So," he said, glancing at me, "the Ross heir is a girl. Interesting." Heat rushed to my face, but I kept steady. "Ross Heritage doesn't compete on gender, Mr. Vander. We compete on reputation, and ours is unmatched." He chuckled, clearly amused. But as the conversation unfolded, I remembered every rule my grandfather drilled into me. Don't lie, take responsibility, stay composed. When Vander pushed for a price cut, I countered with a profit-sharing exclusivity deal that ensured his company long-term security. Silence filled the room. Then Vander leaned back, smiling. "Smart girl. You've got steel. I'll sign." The executives around me exhaled in relief. For the first time, I saw respect flicker in their eyes. That evening, my grandfather didn't praise me, not directly, but as I left his study, he muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Perhaps there's more Miller blood in you than I thought." It wasn't affection, but to me, it felt like the closest thing to pride. I was 24 when the past came knocking. Literally. It was a gray afternoon at the mansion. Rain lashed against the windows, and I was buried in financial reports when Raymond appeared at my door, his face unusually tense. "Miss Emma?" he said quietly. "There are visitors in the drawing room." Visitors? My schedule was clear. I set the papers down and followed him down the hall. Each step echoed louder than the storm outside. When I pushed open the doors, my heart stopped. There they were, my mother, Linda, thinner, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes darting nervously. My father, Robert, older, gaunt, but still carrying the restless energy of a man who couldn't sit still. "Emma," Mom whispered, standing quickly. "Sweetheart, look at you." I froze. 15 years. 15 years since they left me with nothing but a note. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. Dad forced a smile, but it faltered almost instantly. We came because we need to talk. As a family." "Family?" I laughed bitterly. "You walked out on me when I was 12. You stopped being my family the moment you closed that trailer door." Mom's eyes filled with tears. She stepped closer. We were desperate, Emma. We owed so much money. And your father— Don't blame this on me, Dad snapped, glaring at her before turning back to me. Emma, I was sick. I still am. The debts— they've crushed us. But you— His eyes darted around the opulent room. You've done well. You can help us now. There it was. Not regret. Not love. A plea for money. You came back for this? I said, my voice shaking. For money? Don't say it like that, Mom cried. We're drowning, Emma. You're our daughter. Who else can we turn to? My chest burned, torn between the little girl inside me who still longed for their embrace and the woman who had built walls to survive. I ate cold diner fries while you starved yourself just to feed me, I whispered, staring at Mom. And then you left me. Do you know what that did to me? To wake up alone, no goodbye, just a scrap of paper? Mom covered her mouth with trembling hands, sobbing. Dad stepped forward, his voice rising. Enough. You should be grateful we gave you life, that we raised you at all. And now you owe us. My fists clenched. I owe you nothing. The room vibrated with silence, broken only by the storm outside. I felt Raymond's steady presence behind me, his voice calm but firm. Miss Emma, remember rule number 4, take responsibility. For yourself. I drew a deep breath and looked directly into my father's eyes. I am responsible for myself. For this company. For the legacy grandfather trusted me with. But I am not responsible for your debts, your sickness, or your mistakes. My father's face twisted with anger. Ungrateful little— Robert! Mom cried, pulling at his sleeve. But he yanked away. Ungrateful? My voice cracked, but I stood tall. You abandoned me when I needed you most. Don't you dare come back now, expecting me to fix the wreckage you created. The words hung in the air like knives. Mom sobbed harder, whispering, Please, Emma, please. But I couldn't bend. Not anymore. Leave, I said coldly. Before I forget the last shred of pity I have left for you. Dad's jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with hatred, but Mom dragged him toward the door. They left without another word, the storm swallowing their figures as they disappeared into the night. I stood in the silence that followed, my chest heaving, tears threatening to spill. Raymond placed a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said softly. Then why does it hurt so much? I whispered. Because wounds from family, he replied, are the hardest to heal. And though I had sent them away, I knew this was only the beginning. They would return, and next time, it wouldn't just be with pleas, it would be with claws. The day my parents left the mansion in the storm, I thought I could finally breathe. But peace never lasts long in this house. Weeks later, Raymond knocked on my study door, his usual steady composure cracked. Miss Emma, he said softly, your grandfather is not well. I hurried down the hallway, my heart thundering louder than my footsteps. In his bedroom, the air smelled faintly of medicine and antiseptic. My grandfather, Edward Miller, the man who had terrified me with his sharp eyes and unyielding rules, sat slumped in his chair, his face pale, his hand pressed to his chest. Sit, he rasped when he saw me, as if weakness couldn't rob him of authority. Grandpa, you should be resting. Rest is for the dead. He shot back, then coughed, his whole body trembling. Raymond rushed forward with water, but Edward waved him away, his eyes, though dimmer, still cut through me like steel. I don't have much time, Emma. You need to be ready. My throat closed. Don't say that. Silence, he snapped, then softer. Listen. He pulled open a drawer and handed me a leather folder. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents stamped and notarized legal transfers, corporate shares, guardianship records. One page stopped my breath cold. A Child Protective Services file. It read in black and white what I had always known but never wanted confirmed. Robert and Linda Miller had voluntarily relinquished guardianship of their daughter, Emma Miller, 15 years ago. I couldn't move. My hands trembled, the words blurring. They signed me away? Yes, Edward said. They left you. And I claimed you. Don't ever forget that. Tears stung my eyes, but his voice cut through my grief. A legacy isn't just money or property. It's honor. and honor must be protected at all costs. I nodded, clutching the folder like a shield. In the weeks that followed, his health worsened. He no longer came to the office. Instead, I attended board meetings in his place, the directors eyeing me with thinly veiled skepticism. Anthony, my uncle, and Philippa, my aunt, appeared more often, circling like vultures. At the funeral planning meeting, Anthony leaned close, his breath heavy with scotch. "You really think the old man's empire will fall into your lap, little girl? You've got no idea how this game works." Philippa's smile was sharper than glass. "You'll crumble under the pressure. And when you do, we'll be there to pick up the pieces." I forced a calm smile, though my stomach churned. "You underestimate me at your own risk." They laughed, dismissive, but I caught the flicker of unease in Philippa's eyes. One night, I found myself sitting in my grandfather's study, staring at the ticking clock on his desk. He was asleep upstairs, his breath shallow, every rise and fall of his chest a reminder of how little time remained. Raymond entered quietly, setting down a cup of mint tea. "He's proud of you, you know." "He's never said it," I whispered. Raymond smiled faintly. "That's not his way. But he's been watching every step you've taken. He wouldn't trust you with this if he didn't believe you were ready." I sipped the tea, my chest heavy. Ready? How could anyone be ready to hold a company, a fortune, a family name, while battling parents and relatives who wanted nothing but to strip it away? The answer came from the rules. Be punctual. Be financially independent. Never lie. Take responsibility. Train your mind, body, and soul. They weren't just rules anymore. They were the backbone of who I had become. The following morning, Edward called me to his room once more. His hand shook as he held out an envelope, his name scrawled across the front. "When I'm gone," he said, his voice a thin thread of steel, "open this. It will explain everything. Until then, guard it with your life." I clutched the envelope to my chest, nodding. His eyes softened for the first time in years. "You've already proven yourself, Emma. Now, protect what's ours." Hours later, he slipped into unconsciousness, the monitors beeping steadily at his bedside. I sat beside him, fingers curled around the envelope, knowing the storm was closer than ever. Because when Edward Miller was gone, the vultures wouldn't just circle, they would attack. The day of my grandfather's will reading felt more like a trial than a family gathering. The attorney's office was sleek, walls lined with shelves of leather-bound books, a long polished table stretched across the room. On one side sat board members and company executives, their faces a blend of curiosity and wariness. On the other side, my enemies, my parents, my uncle Anthony, and my aunt Philippa. I sat at the head, Raymond standing silently behind me like a shadow of strength. Mr. Lawrence, my grandfather's longtime lawyer, adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat. "We are here to execute the last will and testament of Edward Miller." The room went still. "All assets," Lawrence read, "including corporate shares, real estate, and the family mansion, valued at approximately $215 million, are hereby left to his granddaughter, Emma Miller. X. The words echoed through the room like a gunshot. My mother gasped, clutching my father's arm. My father's face flushed red. Anthony leaned forward, his smirk curdling into fury. Philippa's painted lips twisted into something between disbelief and envy. "This is outrageous," my father barked, slamming his fist on the table. "We are her legal guardians. This inheritance belongs to us." My stomach dropped, but I held his gaze. "Guardians?" I asked coldly. "You forfeited that title 15 years ago." Mom's voice cracked. "We were desperate, Emma. We had no choice. We always meant to come back." "Save it," I snapped, my voice louder than I expected. "You abandoned me. Don't rewrite history." Anthony jumped in, pounding the table. "If not them, then me. I am Edward's bloodline too. As his son's heir, I have more right than a girl who knows nothing about this empire." Philippa tilted her head, her tone dripping venom. "Face it, Emma. You've been a puppet. You think sitting in board meetings makes you ready to lead a $100 million empire? The company needs stability, not sentiment." My pulse roared in my ears. Rage clawed up my throat, but before I could speak, Lawrence calmly opened another folder. Mr. Robert and Mrs. Linda Miller, he said, eyes flicking toward my parents, signed away guardianship of Emma Miller in a legal proceeding with Child Protective Services 15 years ago. You have no legal authority, nor claim, over her or her inheritance. The color drained from their faces instantly. My mother's lips trembled. My father sank back, speechless for once. Lawrence continued. As for Anthony and Philippa, Miller both have been allocated symbolic inheritances of $50,000 each. Additionally, there is a no contest clause. Should either of you file a lawsuit, you forfeit even this amount. Philippa's composure shattered. 50,000. That's an insult. Anthony's voice rose to a roar. This is manipulation. That old man was senile. Careful, Lawrence interrupted smoothly, his tone like ice. The trust is irrevocable, unless fraud or undue influence can be proven, and given Mr. Edward Miller's meticulous documentation, I doubt such a claim would succeed. The room buzzed with tension. I looked at them, my parents, my uncle, my aunt, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the trembling girl from the trailer anymore. I stood, my hands pressed firmly against the table. You all abandoned honor long before you abandoned me. Grandpa didn't choose me because I was the easiest option. He chose me because I rose when all of you fell. My father's eyes burned with hatred. You think you're better than us? No, I said, my voice steady, sharp as glass. I know I am. For a moment, silence. Then my mother broke into sobs. My father cursed under his breath. Anthony kicked back his chair, and Philippa hissed something too venomous to repeat. Raymond stepped forward, his presence solid, grounding me. The matter is settled, he said firmly. But I knew this wasn't over. Their greed wouldn't die in this room. They would scheme, whisper, and wait for me to stumble. Still, as I looked at my grandfather's portrait on the wall, I heard his voice in my memory. A true legacy is honor. Protect it. I straightened my shoulders. This was my war now, and I was ready. The will reading ended in chaos. My parents stormed out. Anthony slammed the door so hard the walls shook, and Philippa hissed like a cornered snake. But I remained seated, breathing in the silence they left behind. Raymond laid a steady hand on my shoulder. They can shout all they want, Miss Emma. The law, and your grandfather's will, stand with you. I nodded, though my chest ached. Victory felt heavy, not sweet. That night, I sat alone in my grandfather's study. The envelope he had given me weeks before still rested in the drawer. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, the strokes neat but faint, as if written with fading strength. Emma, if you are reading this, I am gone. I didn't choose you because you were my granddaughter. I chose you because you chose to rise. You endured what should have broken you. You kept walking when others surrendered. My fortune is not your true inheritance. Honor Island, guard it with your life. Tears blurred the words, but I read them again and again, until they carved themselves into my soul. The next morning, I stood before the employees of Ross Heritage Jewelers. Hundreds of eyes watched me, skeptical, curious, some even hopeful. I took a deep breath. We are not just a company that sells jewelry, I said, my voice carrying across the room. We are a legacy. My grandfather built this empire on discipline, responsibility, and honor. Those values will not die with him. They live in me, and I promise you, they will carry us forward. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was real. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just holding his legacy. I was becoming it. That evening, I stood on the mansion's balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance. The girl who once woke up in a freezing trailer, abandoned and trembling, was gone. In her place stood a woman forged in fire, carrying a name, a fortune, and a promise carved deeper than stone. I whispered into the night, I won't let you down, Grandpa. And I knew he was still watching, not with judgment, but with pride.